Hello and welcome into this week's ARCA Menards Series Rewind show right here on Racing News Now. As always, I'm your host, Garth Allen. Thank you once again for joining me today. If this is your first time catching a Racing News Now video, consider going down below to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell for notifications so you don't miss a thing going forward from RNN. I'm sorry if I still sound a little stuffy today. Still trying to get over this sinus infection. Mostly over it, but if you can hear a little bit of a difference, I do apologize. Today we are looking back at the fans with benefits 150. I screw that up every time. I'm sorry, Iowa Speedway, but fans with benefits 150 is a very awkward name. So just throwing that out there. 4 caution flags in this race for a total of 27 laps. I didn't even do the race stats. See, this race name has got me all flustered right now. I don't even know what I'm doing right now. 150 laps in this race, total 131.2 miles around the 7/8 mile Iowa Speedway in Newton, Iowa. 2 cars to the back at the beginning of the race. Tommy Vi Jr. for a driver change and Brett Holmes for a backup car. Holmes had wrecked at the end of a practice, didn't even make a qualifying run, and had to start a car that hadn't made any laps at all this season. Kind of a throwback a little bit, actually, because it had the blue paint scheme that Holmes had been running prior to this season. He has switched to an orange scheme this season, so bit of a throwback there. Not the fastest car out there, and definitely not comparable to what the primary car had been, because the primary car he had been extremely fast in practice with, and unfortunately didn't quite get the result that he probably would have with the primary car. So, not a great weekend for Brett Holmes. But again, 4 caution flags in this race. First one came very early, lap number 10. The 69 of Scott Melton spun off turn 2. Very lazy spin off of 2. Got it fired back up right after the caution. Then we went for a long green flag run, lap number 74. We had debris in turn 1 that conveniently came right about the time we were looking for green flag pit stops. Lap 103, also a debris caution for debris on the backstretch. And then final caution of the night, the 06 of Tim Richmond spun on the front stretch, made contact with the wall that separates the front stretch from pit road. Chandler Smith going around the outside of him, right there about the start-finish line, trying to lap Richmond. And apparently Tim just didn't know Chandler was there on the outside, kind of squeezed him up, and then at the last second when Chandler was there, Richmond realizes he's there and kind of yanks it away, and unfortunately, I think kind of yanked it a little too much, and ends up spinning across the grass into that inside wall, tearing up that Toyota composite body that they had gotten from Venturini Motorsports a few weeks ago. Only 2 lead changes in this race. Chandler Smith from the pole led the first 105 laps in this race. Had a bad pit stop on that debris caution at lap 103. Gets mired back in the pack just a bit. That hands the lead to Christian Eckes. Eckes, though, only led for 10 laps when Chandler Smith retook the lead on lap 116 and led the final 35 laps. Chandler Smith absolutely dominated and ran away with this race for his 4th straight short track victory on the ARCA schedule. Chandler Smith is the man on short tracks right now. You can't even touch Chandler Smith. Chandler Smith shows up and he's in his own zip code right now in these short track races. It's just incredible to watch. I mean, even you compare him to his teammates, Christian Eckes, Michael Self, who are running the full season, running for the championship, and they really couldn't do anything with him. Now, Self had a bit of an issue. I think Michael Self was about the only car that probably could have run with Chandler Smith consistently all night. Ty Gibbs had moments where I think he was just as fast as Chandler, but it didn't last. Michael Self, I think, had the car to run with Chandler Smith. Unfortunately, very early in the race, actually on that lap 10 Scott Melton caution, we find that Michael can't get the car out of 4th gear. which really hurt him for the rest of the night because if he can't get it out of fourth gear, that means he's running fourth gear all through cautions and then can't get up to speed very well on the restart. So every restart, he had to pull down to the inside and let everybody go by while he got up to speed in fourth gear, and then he would charge his way back through the field. So if nothing else, he had the second best car on the night because inevitably every time he charged his way back up to second if he had enough time between cautions. So I don't know if he actually had enough to challenge Chandler Smith, but if nothing else, he definitely was the second best car on the night. Didn't quite have enough time on that final stint to get back up to second, though, and Christian Eckes was able to take the second position, make up a little bit of points on Michael Self here. Only 5 points did he gain on Michael Self on the night. So unfortunately, not a huge gain, especially after the big loss that Eckes had in Elko last week after he tangled with Self on that last lap and ended up in 11th when he would have finished 4th or 5th. So it's a small step forward, but Christian's definitely going to need a little bit of bad luck from Michael going forward if this is going to if Eckes is going to get his way back into the championship fold. Carson Hocevar came home in the 4th position, and Ty Gibbs, who had fallen back to 7th on that run before the Tim Richmond spin, put on 4 fresh tires on that final caution and climbed his way back into the top 5. Rest of your top 10, Corey Heim had a very strong car on the night, unfortunately faded on that last run to 6th, but was as high as 2nd at one point. And may have had at different points the ability to run with Chandler Smith, but it wasn't there consistently, and ends up in the 6th position. Travis Braden came home in the 7th position, another strong top 10 run for that team. Brett Holmes came home in 8th. We talked about them being in a backup car. Did manage to finish on the lead lap, though, albeit last car on the lead lap in 8th. And then Joe Graff Jr. down here 9th, and Colby Howard in the 32 this week for Wintron Racing. He came home with a top 10 in 10th. Final page, 11th through 19th, Caden Honeycutt showed back up this week and didn't really do much. Never really heard anything out of Caden Honeycutt. Started in 9th and came home in 11th. Fairly underwhelming performance out of Caden Honeycutt. We've come to expect more out of him when he shows up at the track, and just never really saw anything out of him this week. Gavin Harlan, with his second start with Venturini Motorsports this week, he came home 2 laps down in 12th. Scott Melton, after his early spin, at 15th, and Tim Richmond, after his spin late, came home in the 16th position. But that is your results from the Fans with Benefits 150. Got it right that time. So we are working again on a Chandler Smith interview. We will see when and if that happens. But in the meantime, if you're watching this within the next day or two, it should be up and will be linked down below in the description if it is. If it's not up yet, just make sure you're subscribed and you got those notifications turned on, and you'll get a notification when that does go up. But for now, let's take a look at the point standings following Iowa. Michael Self, of course, does still lead. He now has a 90-point lead over Brett Holmes. Christian Eckes, though, fought his way almost back into that second spot now. He is 110 back there in third, only 20 points behind Brett Holmes. And then he's got 10 points now on Travis Braden, who he has jumped over this week. Braden now sits 120 back there in the 4th position. And then, of course, Joe Graff continuing to fall back here, 255 points back there in the 5th position. 4 wins now for Chandler Smith there in that 9th position. He is now tied with Dick Doheny for the 8th position. Dick Doheny, of course, has made 3 more starts this season than Chandler Smith, and Smith still tied with him for that 8th position. It's incredible that Chandler is running a part-time season this year and can still manage to hold in the top 10 right now with some of these guys that may not run up front every week, but they're running most every race. So that just shows the extremely strong season that Chandler Smith has had. He's got 3 top 5 finishes outside of the 4 wins. So only 1 race outside of the top 10. Very strong season so far for Chandler Smith in the few races that he has run. Of course, he is leading that Sioux Chief Short Track Challenge Championship, and right now, I don't know that anybody's going to be able to touch him in that one. I think we can already say with some fairly good certainty that Chandler Smith is going to be the Sioux Chief Short Track Challenge champion of 2019. Things can still happen. We've still got a good amount of short track races that play into that championship remaining in the season, but unless something drastic happens, I think that's going to be a Chandler Smith short track championship this year. But that is your point standings following the Fans with Benefits 150, and I believe that will do it for us on this ARCA Rewind show. Xfinity Rewind and a K&N Rewind coming up either tonight or tomorrow morning. Not sure. Just depends when that K&N race ends and how much time we've got to get that stuff done tonight. Then, of course, Cup Rewind coming up tomorrow evening, Sunday evening, to recap their race from New Hampshire. So now that we've got Iowa done for the weekend, now we're looking ahead to 3 races from New Hampshire, and there's actually a 4th race, 3rd one just today from New Hampshire. The modifieds are in action today too, but of course we don't cover modifieds, so I will be watching that race though, and I think a lot of you probably should as well, because it is going to be a fantastic race. It'll be over there on Fans Choice TV, so definitely something I think you'll want to check out. Modifieds always put on a good show, especially in New Hampshire. So, a little plug for a series that we don't even cover. So, if you haven't done it already, you need to go down below, hit that subscribe button, ring the bell for notifications so you don't miss a thing going forward from RNN. While you're down there, why don't you hit that big thumbs up button if you like the video. It is much appreciated when you do. But at that, this has been the ARCA Menards Series Rewind Show. I'm Garth Allen for Racing News Now.